He was a battle-worn veteran seeking peace in the snowy silence of Colorado. But when his German shepherd froze and growled at a passing general's convoy, everything changed. Ordered to stand down, he hesitated, because he had learned long ago to trust his dog's instincts more than any command. What they uncovered beneath that snow wasn't just a secret. It was the ghost of a buried war that was never meant to be found. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more stories. The morning sun over Denver was pale and cold, its light fractured by drifting snow that fell in slow, deliberate spirals. The air smelled of metal and frost, and the wind carried the faint hum of engines from the nearby airfield. Beneath that frozen dawn, a man and his dog approached the guarded entrance of an old military compound, now repurposed as a national security facility. Ethan Cole walked with the steady, unhurried gait of someone who had once lived by discipline. 45 years old, broad-shouldered, his frame carried the marks of decades in service, strong but slightly worn, like an old rifle that had seen too many wars. His face bore the rough edges of resilience, a sharp jawline, deep lines near the eyes carved by sleepless nights and sandstorms, and a week's worth of unshaven stubble that hinted he had never quite adjusted to civilian life. His eyes, gray-blue and watchful, held the weight of someone who had lost brothers in faraway deserts. There was a calmness to him, but also that fragile alertness of a man who had been betrayed before and learned never to let his guard down again. Beside him trotted Rex, a 9-year-old German shepherd with a coat of deep sable and black, his left ear nicked from a shrapnel wound sustained in Afghanistan. The dog moved with military precision, his posture proud yet cautious. His amber eyes scanned the perimeter, reading movement, posture, scent, calculating threat before it arrived. Rex had once saved Ethan from an ambush on a dusty road outside Kandahar. Since then, they had been inseparable, soldier and shadow, brothers in survival. As they neared the checkpoint, the world narrowed to the sound of boots crunching snow. A guard tower loomed above, and a voice called out through a loudspeaker, firm but courteous. "Morning, sir. Credentials, please." Ethan handed over his identification card, freshly issued, sealed with the Defense Technology Division insignia. He had been invited to brief the department about cybersecurity threats within military communication networks. The work was personal to him. His father, a cryptographer during the Cold War, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 2001. This briefing, he hoped, would finally allow him to reopen old files locked behind clearance walls. The young corporal at the gate, Private Jensen, couldn't have been more than 23. His cheeks were still too smooth for the frost that bit at them, and his gloved hands trembled slightly as he inserted Ethan's ID into the scanner. Jensen's breath fogged the air as he muttered, "One moment, sir." The machine beeped, then again, louder this time, flashing red. The sound sliced through the stillness like a siren. Jensen frowned and scanned the card again. "That's odd." He tried to smile politely, but his training forced him to straighten his spine. "Sir, could you confirm your clearance level?" "Level Sigma 5, Ethan replied calmly. "Authorized for today's briefing." "Sigma 5? Jensen repeated, confused. "That's not in our system anymore." The second guard stepped forward. Sergeant Mark Henson, a thick-set man in his late 40s with a trimmed gray beard, moved like someone who'd spent too long in command of checkpoints and suspicions. His uniform was crisp, his tone sharp but not unkind. "Let's see that." He examined the card, squinting at the holographic seal. Where'd you get this issue, Mr. Cole? From the Defense Technology Division in Arlington, Ethan replied. His voice was calm, but his pulse had quickened. Rex let out a low growl beside him. Easy, boy, Ethan murmured, resting a hand on the dog's back. He felt Rex's muscles tense beneath the fur. The shepherd was never wrong about people. Henson glanced toward the surveillance cameras, his instincts telling him something was off. Private, call command verification. Tell them we've got a Sigma-level credential pinging red. Ethan's jaw tightened. Is there a problem, Sergeant? Just a glitch, I'm sure, Henson said. Though his tone carried the weight of habit, men like him didn't believe in coincidences. Minutes dragged by. The wind picked up, scattering snow into the space between them. Ethan could feel the cold working its way through his gloves, but deeper still was the unease twisting in his chest. This was supposed to be a routine briefing. Yet the way Jensen avoided eye contact, the way Henson's hand rested near his holster, it felt like the beginning of something else. The radio on Henson's shoulder crackled. Checkpoint Delta, this is command. Escort the subject to level 2 verification. Repeat, escort immediately. Copy that, Henson replied, then turned to Ethan. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us. Ethan met his gaze evenly. Is this standard procedure? For a Sigma clearance that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, it is. He didn't resist. He'd learned long ago that Defiance only closed doors faster. But inside, his mind moved with soldier's precision, cataloging exits, guard positions, security cameras, and blind spots. Rex walked close beside him, silent now, head low but eyes alert. They were led into a narrow corridor beneath the checkpoint building, a place of concrete walls and flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the scent of wet fur. The hum of machinery pulsed through the floor. Jensen unlocked a steel door leading into a windowless room furnished only with a desk, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Please have a seat, Henson said, gesturing to the chair opposite his. Ethan sat down slowly, Rex at his feet, the dog's tail tapping once against the floor before going still. Henson sat behind the desk, typing into the terminal, his brow furrowed as the system displayed something unexpected. Strange, he muttered. This code, it's archived, under Project Sentinel. The name hit Ethan like a gust of cold air. What did you just say? Project Sentinel, Henson repeated, glancing up. You were assigned to this? Ethan shook his head, his voice dropping low. That project was decommissioned in the 90s. Then why does your clearance reactivate it? Before Ethan could answer, the intercom crackled again, this time with a new voice. Calm, authoritative, older. Sergeant Henson, this is Colonel Marshall. Bring the subject to me. Now. Henson hesitated for only a moment before nodding to his men. You heard the colonel. Ethan rose, motioning to Rex. Come on, buddy. The German shepherd stood tall, snow melting off his fur, eyes glinting under the fluorescent light. He looked less like a pet and more like a soldier sensing the next battle. As they stepped into the hallway, Ethan glanced once more at the flashing red indicator on the terminal screen. It still read, Project Sentinel. Active. Something long buried had just awakened, and he was standing in the middle of it. The elevator descended slowly, a hollow groan echoing off the metal walls. The fluorescent lights flickered as if reluctant to follow them into the dark. Ethan stood in silence, hands cuffed loosely before him, not out of necessity, but out of protocol. Beside him, Rex sat obediently, his fur still damp from melting snow, his amber eyes fixed on the door as if he could smell the secrets waiting below. The only other presence was Colonel Marshall, a man who seemed carved from the same cold steel as the walls around them. Marshall was in his late 50s, tall and lean, his shoulders squared with the quiet authority of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. His short-cropped silver hair revealed a military precision that extended to every motion, each breath measured, each glance deliberate. A thin scar ran from his temple to his jawline, disappearing beneath his collar. Rumor once whispered that he earned it in a failed hostage extraction in Bosnia, but no one ever asked, and he never confirmed. His voice carried that same calm edge, like a man who had long ago learned that control was power and emotion was weakness. When the doors opened, the temperature dropped further. They stepped into a corridor lined with reinforced glass and security panels that pulsed faint blue light. Each door they passed was marked with a single letter, A through H, and a glowing security sigil beside it. The air smelled faintly of ozone and old paper. "This level doesn't exist on the map," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "That's the idea," Marshall replied without looking back. "Everything down here is need to know. And right now, Mr. Cole, I need to know what the hell you've brought to my doorstep." They entered a room large enough to hold a conference, but stripped bare except for a metal table, 2 chairs, and a single screen mounted on the wall. The lights hummed overhead. Marshall gestured for Ethan to sit. Rex positioned himself at his master's side, silent and alert, tail resting on the floor like a drawn line. Marshall sat across from him and placed Ethan's ID card on the table. He tapped it once, and the holographic seal flickered alive, projecting a faint blue shimmer of encrypted symbols. This card was issued 3 days ago under a clearance level that hasn't existed since 1998. Project Sentinel. I assume that rings a bell? Ethan met his gaze. Not firsthand. My father used to talk about Sentinel when I was a kid. Said it was a myth. A black program that studied data warfare before computers were fast enough to handle it. Marshall's eyes narrowed. Your father's name? Jonathan Cole. He was a cryptographer, worked for the NSA until he disappeared in 2001. Marshall leaned back slightly. Disappeared? Official report said heart attack while overseas, but there was no body, no funeral. Ethan's jaw tightened. You can see why I didn't trust government paperwork much. After that, Marshall studied him for a long moment, then turned to the screen and typed a sequence of commands. The room lights dimmed as the screen flickered to life, revealing the same string of encrypted symbols that had triggered the security alert. He magnified one portion, highlighting a repeating pattern buried deep in the code. Recognize this? He asked. Ethan froze. His pulse quickened. The pattern on the screen, 3 diagonal slashes followed by a mirrored triangle, was a cipher his father had taught him when he was 12. It was supposed to be a game, something they'd share between them. But now, 2 decades later, it appeared here, inside the Pentagon's database. That symbol's not random, Ethan said quietly. No, it's not, Marshall replied. It's a dead signature, the kind used to identify internal transmissions from defunct programs. Someone sent this message last week, and your ID was the only clearance capable of decoding it. Ethan's mind raced. That's impossible. I've never accessed your systems. Yet the signal pinged your clearance, traced directly to your identification, Marshall said. If you didn't send it, someone did using your identity. Rex let out a low growl, breaking the silence. Marshall's gaze flicked to the dog, then back to Ethan. "He's a good soldier," he said almost softly. "Trained? 6 tours. Smarter than most people I've served with." A faint smile ghosted across Marshall's lips. "Then he'll understand this part. If you're lying, I have authority to detain you indefinitely." "I'm not lying," Ethan said evenly. "And you're wasting time chasing the wrong man." Marshall didn't respond. Instead, he keyed another command. The lights dimmed again, and the screen displayed a faint pulsing waveform, a digital heartbeat. "This was the transmission your card unlocked," he said. "A signal coming from somewhere within the continental U.S., encoded with what we believe to be Sentinel's original cryptographic language." Ethan leaned forward. "You said Sentinel was terminated." "It was supposed to be, but there's something you need to understand." Marshall folded his hands. "Programs like Sentinel don't die. They go dormant. And sometimes, when someone wakes them up, the system doesn't know who to trust anymore." The elevator doors hissed open again, and a woman entered. She was in her early 40s, tall and slender, with auburn hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck and wire-rimmed glasses perched low on a sharp nose. Her expression carried the analytical calm of someone who saw the world as patterns and numbers. "Dr. Ward," Marshall said, rising. "Our systems expert." "Colonel," she nodded, then glanced at Ethan. "And this must be our unexpected guest." Ethan stood. "Dr. Ward?" "Catherine Ward." She introduced herself, offering a brief handshake. Her grip was firm, professional. "Cybernetics Division. I've analyzed the data linked to your clearance." "What did you find?" She placed a small tablet on the table and projected a series of encrypted nodes. "This code wasn't written by an external hacker. It originated from within Sentinel's archived architecture, something that technically shouldn't exist. But there's more." She tapped again, isolating a string of text embedded in the cipher. "If found, deliver to Cole." The air left the room. Ethan's hands clenched unconsciously. "My father's last name." "Exactly," Ward said. "And based on the timestamp, this code was activated less than 10 days ago." Marshall crossed his arms. "Which means someone with deep access resurrected a project buried since the Cold War, and they used your identity to do it." Ethan looked down at Rex, whose ears twitched at the tension thickening the air. "You think my father's alive?" Marshall's reply was slow, deliberate. "I think your father left something behind, and now someone wants you to find it." For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the quiet hum of machines filled the room. Then Marshall straightened. "We're going deeper. Level Omega. That's where the Sentinel archives are stored. If there are answers, they're down there." Ethan nodded once. "Then let's find them." Rex gave a short, low bark, one that sounded almost like agreement. As they stepped toward the elevator again, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the ghosts of his father's past were no longer buried. They were awake, watching, and waiting for him to follow the trail his father had left behind. The deeper they went, the older the air became. It carried a scent of rust and old electricity, the kind that clung to sealed rooms long forgotten. Ethan followed Colonel Marshall and Dr. Ward through a narrow passage that curved downward beneath layers of reinforced steel. Overhead, frost had crept along the pipes like veins of ice. Rex padded silently beside him, his breath visible in the cold, his ears flicking at every echo. The dog's senses were taut, as though he could feel the weight of the ghosts buried here. At the end of the hallway stood a heavy blast door marked Archive B, Sentinel. Marshall placed his hand on a biometric scanner. The door hissed open with a sigh, releasing a gust of stale air and the faint whir of dormant machinery waking after decades of silence. Inside was a room lined with old computer terminals, reels of magnetic tape, and steel cabinets stamped with faded security insignia. A flickering monitor illuminated dust motes that danced like snowflakes in the beam of a single overhead lamp. Dr. Catherine Ward moved forward with the assurance of someone returning to a place she had once ruled. Her face, though calm, softened with something almost human, a flicker of memory. "I never thought I'd see this place again," she murmured. Her auburn hair caught the light as she brushed it behind one ear, revealing faint lines of exhaustion near her temples. Marshall motioned toward the central console. "Dr. Ward, bring it online." Ward's fingers flew across the keyboard, the keys clattering like gunfire in the silence. "These systems predate modern encryption," she said. "If Sentinel's data still exists, it'll be fragmented, stored across redundant networks. We'll need to manually recompile." Ethan watched the screen fill with cascading lines of code, green text scrolling against black. He felt the room pressing in around him, the hum of the machines mixing with the low growl from Rex's throat. Something about this place. It wasn't just old. It was haunted by unfinished purpose. Then, a voice crackled through the intercom. "Ward, it's Control. You're pulling energy from a disconnected grid. Power reallocation will trigger a security trace." Ward ignored the warning, her eyes narrowing. "Let them trace it. We're already ghosts in their system." A series of encrypted directories appeared. She selected one labeled Cipher 5, her breath caught. "Here, Jonathan Cole's files?" Ethan's chest tightened. "My father." Marshall leaned over her shoulder, studying the strings of code. "Can you open it?" Ward hesitated. "Partially, but there's something strange. It's not just a file, it's a lock." She entered a command. The screen flickered, then displayed a single line of text. "If you can read this, follow the 9 shadows." Ethan stepped closer. The message was simple, yet it carried the same code signature that had appeared on his ID. "He left this for me," Ethan said quietly. "He knew I'd come." Marshall's expression hardened. 9 shadows. What does that mean? Ward leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. "It's an internal reference. During Sentinel's final phase, your father suspected infiltration, operatives inside the government acting for rival powers. He called them the 9 shadows. It was dismissed as paranoia at the time." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "And now?" "Now I'm not so sure," Ward said. "Look at this." She projected a holographic map across the table. 9 red dots appeared, scattered across the country. Washington, D.C., Langley, San Diego, and beyond. Each mark corresponds to a data breach that used Sentinel's encryption keys within the last 20 years. These aren't random hacks. They're coordinated. Marshall frowned, his deep-set eyes narrowing as he traced a finger over one location. "Denver. That's here." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him, an invisible weight pressing down on his chest. "You think someone used my father's work to build a network?" Ward met his gaze. "Not someone. Many. And they've been active for decades. That signal your ID unlocked. It wasn't just a call for help. It was a warning." The lights flickered again, and a low alarm began to hum. Marshall turned sharply toward the door. "What now?" Ward's hands flew to the keyboard. "The system just triggered a remote access." Someone's trying to delete these files. From where? Ethan demanded. Ward's voice tightened. Internal network. That means they're inside this facility. Rex barked sharply, his hackles rising. His head turned toward the hallway, a low growl building in his throat. Ethan crouched beside him, whispering, "What do you hear, boy?" The dog's ears pointed toward the door. Footsteps, faint but growing closer. Marshall drew his sidearm, a matte black SIG pistol. "Ward, back up the data, now!" She worked fast, transferring files to a portable drive. "Almost there. 30 seconds." Ethan scanned the room, his combat instincts awakening. There were no windows, only the door they'd come through, and a ventilation shaft large enough for a man to crawl through. "If they're inside, we need a fallback." Marshall nodded. "Agreed. Ward, once the transfer completes, we seal the archive." Rex barked again, louder this time. The door's magnetic lock flashed red. Someone was trying to override it. Ward yanked the drive free. "Got it! Move!" Marshall ordered. They bolted toward the elevator at the far end of the corridor. Ethan's breath came in sharp bursts. Rex ran ahead, his paws echoing on the steel floor. Behind them, the archive door gave way with a metallic groan, followed by the sound of boots. "Who are they?" Ethan called over his shoulder. Marshall's reply was grim. "If you're right, one of the 9 shadows." They reached the elevator, just as the overhead lights dimmed completely. Ward slammed her hand on the panel. "Manual override! Come on, come on!" The doors slid open, revealing a narrow shaft descending even deeper into darkness. "Down!" Marshall ordered. Ethan and Rex entered first, followed by Ward and the Colonel. The doors shut just as a burst of gunfire shattered the silence above. Bullets clanged off steel, sparks raining down. In the dim light of the elevator, Ward clutched the drive close to her chest. "If they wanted to erase Sentinel," she said, breathing hard, "then whatever's in this file must be the reason it was buried." Ethan looked down at Rex, who had pressed close to his leg. "And maybe the reason my father disappeared." The elevator rattled as it descended into the unknown. When it stopped, a faint blue light glowed from the walls ahead, marking the entrance to yet another sealed level. A small plaque read simply, "Omega, Restricted Access." Marshall exhaled slowly. End of the line. Ethan stepped forward, feeling the chill creep deeper into his bones. "No," he said softly. "It's where it begins." The wind outside the facility howled like a wounded beast, flinging shards of snow against the reinforced glass as the storm raged above ground. Deep beneath that blizzard, Ethan Cole knelt beside an old metal box on a work table, its surface mottled with rust and frost. His hands, scarred and calloused from years of combat, trembled slightly as he unlatched the lid. Inside, wrapped in layers of oilcloth and faded newspaper, lay a black external hard drive the size of a man's palm, his father's final message. Rex lay beside him, head resting on his paws, amber eyes reflecting the dim blue light of the monitors around them. The dog's ears twitched at every distant vibration, every hum from the power conduits in the concrete walls. Dr. Catherine Ward stood nearby, her auburn hair tied back, but loosened by sweat and static. Her face, usually calm, was drawn tight with concentration as she connected the drive to a secured terminal. The flickering lights from the screen cast shadows across her sharp features. "It's old tech," she murmured. "Pre-encryption era, but there's an internal self-erasing protocol. One wrong access, and it wipes itself." Colonel Marshall stood behind her, arms folded, his posture rigid. His breath steamed in the cold air, and his eyes, steel gray, weary, were fixed on the screen. He had changed since their escape from the upper level. The calm control had hardened into something sharper. Beneath that military precision, there was the faint tremor of guilt, of a man realizing how deep the lies had run in the government he'd served his whole life. "Can you bypass it?" Ethan asked. Ward exhaled slowly. "Not bypass. I'll have to talk to it." Ethan frowned. "Talk?" She gave a small smile, humorless but alive. "Your father didn't build systems to be broken. He built them to be understood." Her fingers began moving across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled rapidly, then paused at a prompt asking for a 7-character cipher key. Ethan stared at it. 7 characters, he whispered. "My father's call sign was cipher 5, but that's 6. Ward looked at him. "Anything he used repeatedly? A phrase, a word, something only you'd know?" Ethan's mind raced. Childhood memories flickered. His father at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, teaching him how to find hidden messages in everyday patterns. He remembered a phrase his father always used before leaving for deployments. "Remember, the snow never lies." He typed it in. "Snow true." The screen froze, then unlocked with a faint chime. The hard drive's directory opened. Ward inhaled sharply. "We're in." The data unfolded before them. Webs of connections, classified reports, encrypted correspondence, and dossiers with names that shouldn't have existed in any database. Ethan leaned closer, his eyes scanning the entries. These are high-ranking officials. Senators, generals, intelligence heads. Marshall's voice was grim. 9 of them. The 9 shadows. Ward pulled the files into a visualization, and on the screen bloomed a digital map. 9 glowing nodes connected by thin, pulsing lines, spreading like veins across the continental United States. Each node corresponds to a figure currently holding, or recently holding, a critical position in defense or intelligence infrastructure, she said. These aren't just double agents. They're architects of policy. Every decision, every budget allocation, subtly shifts power toward their objective. "And what's that objective?" Ethan asked. Ward's fingers paused above the keys. Destabilization through influence, not war. They manipulate internal politics, redirect funds, compromise systems, until the structure collapses from within. Rex gave a low whine, sensing the tension building in his owner. Ethan's jaw clenched. My father was right. They didn't kill him for what he knew. They erased him because he tried to stop them. Suddenly, an alert flared across the monitors. Data breach detected. Ward swore under her breath. Someone's trying to purge the network remotely. Marshall snapped into command mode. Cut the uplink. I can't. It's coming from command level. Someone up top just initiated a purge sequence. Ethan's head jerked toward the colonel. Who has that authority? Marshall's expression darkened. General Marcus Graham. Ethan froze. The name hit like a bullet. Graham, the man who had personally signed the letter inviting him to Denver. A man he once respected, a decorated general with a reputation for loyalty and iron discipline. He set me up, Ethan whispered. He wanted me here to trigger the failsafe. Ward's eyes widened. He's not trying to contain this. He's trying to erase it. Marshall strode to the weapons locker, pulling out an M4 carbine and tossing Ethan a spare sidearm. Then we move. The only way to stop the purge is from the command room. Ethan loaded the pistol with smooth, practiced motions. Then we end it now. They moved through the lower tunnels, lights flickering from emergency power. Snowmelt dripped from the ceiling, echoing like a metronome. Rex led the way, his movements precise, his nose twitching at every shift in the air. The closer they got to the command-level elevator, the stronger the hum of the facility's generators became. When the doors opened at the upper level, the storm outside roared louder, seeping through the cracked glass walls. Sirens wailed. Soldiers ran through the corridors, confusion on their faces. Marshall raised his badge. "Stand down!" he barked, but it was too late. Security forces were already converging, weapons drawn. "Orders from General Graham," one shouted. "Cole and Ward are under detainment." Ethan didn't wait. He moved like instinct, taking cover behind a column, returning fire with precision honed from years of training. Rex lunged at a soldier who had flanked them, knocking him to the floor, his growl echoing through the chaos. Ward crouched beside a console, plugging in the external drive to manually stop the purge. Sparks flew as bullets struck metal. 10 seconds, she yelled over the noise. Marshall provided cover, firing short, controlled bursts. "You get that data safe, Doctor?" "Done." Ward slammed the key drive closed. "Backup secure." "Move!" Ethan shouted. He and Rex cleared a path toward the hangar bay, the storm raging just beyond the blast doors. As they burst through into the open air, the blizzard swallowed them whole, snow slicing across their faces, wind howling like a living thing. Behind them, the facility's alarms died one by one, replaced by the distant echo of explosions as Graham's men began burning evidence. Ethan looked back at the glow beneath the snow. "We're not done," he murmured, gripping the drive tightly in his gloved hand. "Not until every one of them is exposed." Rex pressed against his leg, shivering but resolute. Together they vanished into the storm, the last two sentinels carrying the truth their enemies had tried to bury. Snow fell like fine dust over the jagged ridges of Colorado's highlands, each flake glinting faintly in the light of a distant dawn. The mountains were silent except for the rhythmic crunch of boots and paws moving through the powder. Ethan Cole trudged behind Dr. Catherine Ward, his breath forming short clouds in the thin air. Rex walked at his side, tail low but ears alert, leaving deep paw prints in the snow. The storm had passed, but its memory still haunted the landscape. Broken branches, a downed power line, and smoke curling faintly from the horizon where the facility had once stood. They reached a steel door set into the mountainside, half hidden by snowdrifts. Ward placed her palm on a biometric scanner, and the door opened with a low hydraulic hiss, revealing a narrow tunnel lit by pale blue lights. "Welcome to Echo Point," she said quietly. "One of Sentinel's old backup sites. It was meant for data redundancy during the Cold War. Now it's our last refuge." Ethan followed her in, brushing snow from his jacket. His uniform was torn, streaked with ash, his beard rough and flecked with frost. There was exhaustion in his posture, the kind that comes not from running, but from knowing you've survived when others didn't. Ward noticed his silence and said softly, "You did what had to be done. Without you, that data would have been lost." He didn't respond immediately. "People died up there," he said at last. "Marshall's men, your analysts, maybe even Marshall himself." Ward paused, removing her gloves. Her hands were pale and slender, with small burns near the fingertips, evidence of long hours spent with old equipment. "He knew the risk," she said. "He stayed behind to buy us time. That's what soldiers do." Rex brushed against Ethan's leg, his warm body grounding him back to the present. The dog lifted his head, eyes scanning the corridor, nostrils twitching at the scent of oil, metal, and something faintly electric. 9 years old, and yet he moved with the same precision as a trained operative, alert, loyal, unflinching. At the end of the corridor, the tunnel opened into a large chamber. Rows of servers blinked like constellations in the dark, their steady hum the only sound. The temperature was cold enough to see breath. Ward moved to a control console and inserted the encrypted drive, the one they had risked everything for. "This is it," she said. "Your father's final message." Ethan approached slowly. The screen flickered, then displayed a simple line of text. "If you are reading this, you have seen what I could not finish. The truth must be seen, even if it burns those who stand in the light." The message was followed by a series of ciphers, each referencing stored data within Sentinel's archive. Ward typed rapidly, and the system began decrypting. Reports, memos, covert communications all flowed onto the screen. Names appeared again: Graham, Holloway, Strickland, Navarro, the 9 shadows laid bare. "They can't hide anymore," Ward said. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with awe. "This will bring down half the defense network." Ethan nodded. "It'll also destroy what's left of Sentinel." Ward met his gaze. "Maybe that's what your father wanted." Hours passed as they compiled and transmitted the information to global watchdog networks and independent agencies. Each upload stripped away a piece of the hidden empire. By dawn, the world would know everything: the conspiracies, the financial trails, the assassinations buried under national security. When the final file transferred, Ward turned to him. "It's done." Ethan sat heavily on a nearby bench. His muscles ached, his mind replaying flashes of the past weeks. Gunfire, coded messages, his father's voice recorded in static. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal tag, dull from years of wear. It read, "Jonathan Cole, Cipher 5. He thumbed the engraved letters gently. Ward approached, her expression softening. "He'd be proud, you know." Ethan shook his head. "He'd say we were just cleaning up his mess." Before Ward could answer, a voice crackled from the emergency radio beside the console. "This is Colonel Marshall," it said, faint and distorted. Ward's eyes widened. "He's alive." Ethan leaned in, twisting the dial. "Colonel, this is Cole. We thought you didn't make it." Static filled the channel. Then Marshall's voice again, strained. "Not much time. Good work, both of you. The files, did they go through?" "All of them," Ward replied. A short pause. "Then we've done it. Graham's gone. The 9 are falling one by one. But listen carefully. There's something you don't know." The line crackled violently. Sentinel wasn't the first. It was built from something older. There are more layers. Cole, don't trust. The transmission cut out with a screech. Ward tried to re-establish the signal, but the line was dead. Ethan stared at the radio, jaw tight. He said Sentinel wasn't the first. She nodded, which means it wasn't the last. Silence settled again, broken only by the soft hum of the servers. Outside, the storm had calmed, and through the small observation window, dawn light spilled across the snow. The world seemed at peace, but Ethan knew better. He clipped his father's tag back around his neck and stood. Ward turned toward him. "Where will you go?" Ethan glanced down at Rex, who was watching him patiently, tail giving a faint thump against the floor. "Wherever the next trail leads," he said. "The pattern's still alive, and someone needs to follow it." Ward gave a faint smile. "You always sound like him when you say things like that." Ethan reached out, resting a hand on Rex's back. "He trained both of us to keep going." Ward looked at them. soldier and dog framed by the pale light of a new day, and something in her expression softened into hope. "Then Godspeed, Ethan." He nodded once, then turned toward the exit tunnel. Snow drifted in through the half-open door, flakes melting as they touched Rex's fur. The dog looked back one last time, as if memorizing the place where ghosts had finally been set free. As they stepped out into the cold, Ethan's radio crackled unexpectedly. A sequence of tones played, short, long, short, repeating 3 times. He froze. That signal. It was the same cipher his father had used decades ago. Ward emerged behind him, eyes wide. "That's Sentinel Protocol." Ethan met her gaze. "No," he said quietly, a chill running through his voice. "That's something else." The final transmission whispered through the static, a voice distorted but familiar. "The pattern is still active." Ethan looked toward the horizon where the wind stirred the snow into shifting shapes. He exhaled slowly, then smiled faintly, not with relief, but with resolve. "Then so are we." He stepped forward into the storm, Rex close at his side, as the mountains swallowed them both once more, soldier and sentinel, walking toward the next war that no one would ever see coming. In the quiet after the storm, as snow settled gently over the mountains, Ethan lifted his face toward the pale light breaking through the clouds. The world was cold, uncertain, and scarred. Yet in that silence, something sacred lingered. It wasn't victory he felt, nor vengeance, but grace. That quiet reminder that even in the darkest storms, light still finds a way through. Perhaps that was the lesson his father wanted him to see, that truth, like faith, cannot be buried forever. Just as the snow covers the ground, but never stops spring from returning, so too does God's mercy rise after every season of loss. Ethan placed his hand on Rex's head, whispering a prayer, not for himself, but for everyone who had fought unseen battles, who carried invisible scars, and still chose kindness. "We're never truly alone," he said softly, "because even in the coldest places, He walks beside us. And maybe that's what miracles really are. Not flashes of divine power, but the quiet strength to keep walking when everything else falls silent."